Hey everyone, my name is Laura Landers. I'm an AmeriCorps member with the Arkansas Reads program. This program places volunteers, AmeriCorps members, with the Literacy Council in their area to help people improve their English reading, writing, and speaking skills through free one-on-one or small group tutoring. Improving their literacy helps people be more successful, applying for jobs, helping their children with homework, reading and understanding directions, reading a menu, reading and writing a letter or text, communicating with coworkers, making new friends, and many, many more life experiences. The Literacy Council, where I volunteer, is the Ozark Foothills Literacy Project, OFLP for short. OFLP serves Independence County, Sharp County, Fulton County, Izard County, and Jackson County in Arkansas. I hope you will join me each week in reading and discussing a book, one chapter at a time. Feel free to discuss in the comments. All I ask is that we keep it friendly. Also, please click on the registration link in the description box below and fill out the form to become an official member of the OFLP YouTube Book Club. Heroes of America Illustrated Lives. Clara Barton and the American Red Cross. Cover illustration by Jordi Torres. Heroes of America, Clara Barton and the American Red Cross by Eve Marco. Chapter illustrations by Pablo Marcos. Chapter 1. Learning from David. Come on, Clara, David Barton yelled over his shoulder at the young girl riding behind him. Let's see if you can catch me. Clara Barton was only 10 years old. Her brother David was 23, but that wasn't going to stop her from riding as fast as, or even faster than he could. Holding the reins tight in her hand, she bent low till her head almost reached the horse's ears. Come on, Blackie, she whispered. Let's show David how fast we can ride. Then she kicked the mare's haunches with her small feet. But Blackie didn't need any help or reminder. She galloped fast, steam coming out of her nostrils as they rode across the cold, bare fields. It was winter in the year 1832, and the Massachusetts countryside was frozen and empty except for the two riders on their horses racing against the wind. In just a few minutes, Clara came alongside her brother, and just a few minutes after that, she passed him. Then she reined Blackie in and slowly stopped to let David catch up with her. I beat you, she said, her dark eyes laughing. You beat me fair and square, David agreed. But just remember one thing, Clara. If you ever have to ride fast, stretch forward as much as you can and keep your head low. If you sit up, that will make you go slower. Clara listened carefully. David was her riding teacher. When she was 5, he'd taught her to ride bareback with no saddle. Everything she knew about riding came from him. David grinned. Race you to French River, he said, and before Clara could say anything, he was off. It didn't take Clara much time to catch up with him again. He was older and faster, and he was riding his own horse. But Clara was small and light as a feather, She was practically one with the saddle, and there was no stopping her now. It was late in December, a few days before Christmas, but so far the winter had been a mild one, and there was little snow on the ground. Clara wished more snow would come soon, in time for Christmas. Finally, they got to French River, which ran down the hills and curved along the fields and meadows. David got off his horse. So did Clara. "You beat me again," he told her. "But let's see you do this." David walked toward French River. Clara followed, curious and a little nervous. Her brother David loved to play games. Everything he did well. He was the best horseback rider around. He was the best climber and ball player, too. He taught her how to do all these things. What was he going to show her now? They came to the edge of French River. This was the narrowest point of the river. Somebody had put a long log across it so that the farmers who worked the fields could cross here. The log was hardly more than a foot wide. "Follow me," David said. He put one foot on the log, then another, and then he started walking along the narrow log towards the other shore. Clara didn't hesitate. She loved and trusted David more than anybody in the world. He was her best friend. She stepped on the log. The log began to sway back and forth. Suddenly, Clara felt afraid. "Are you sure this is safe?" she asked. David looked back over his shoulder. "Positive," he told her. "Just keep on walking and don't look down." Clara did just what David said. She took one step, then another, then another. Ahead of her was David's big, broad back. Clara had 3 other brothers and sisters besides David. They were all much older than her, and she loved them very much. But nobody was like David. Clara took longer, bigger steps on the narrow log. David was way ahead of her, and she wanted to catch up. But it was too bad that the log was so narrow, she thought. Otherwise, she would have passed him here, too. Just then, David reached the edge of the log and stepped off. The log jerked violently up and down. Clara froze in her tracks. Suddenly, she couldn't take another step. "Come on, Clara," David said. "Walk straight ahead. You won't fall." But suddenly, Clara was afraid of falling. She looked down. The water was dark and deep. "Don't look down," David told her. "Look straight ahead and take one step after another. Don't look down and don't stop." She raised her foot and took one step. The log under her foot shook and her foot trembled. But she took another step, and then another, and another. She kept her eyes straight ahead, just like David had told her to. Beneath her feet, the log was still shaking. But it didn't matter anymore. She had to keep on walking. Clara's steps grew bigger and more confident. In no time at all, she was on the other side. David caught her as she jumped off the log, and then lifted her and swung her gently around. "Hooray for Clara!" he shouted. "The bravest girl in the entire state of Massachusetts." Clara laughed. Her long, dark hair that had been tied with a ribbon fell loose all around her face. David put her down, and she picked up the red ribbon from the ground. All her ribbons were red. Clara loved the color red. "You learned an important lesson today, Clara," David said. "What did you learn?" Clara thought hard. David always taught her to do things the proper way. He'd shown her the proper way to throw a ball and the proper way to catch it, the proper way to ride horses, and the proper way to take care of them. Clara smiled. "I learned to keep on walking, not look down, and never give up," she said. David grinned. "Perfect," he said. "I couldn't have said it better." Clara and David raced home just as the sun was going down. "I wish the days were longer," Clara said happily as she came inside the house. "That way we could spend more time outdoors." "Right now, I'm happy to see you indoors," Mrs. Barton said, coming out of the kitchen in her gingham apron and looking fondly at her youngest daughter. "I was waiting for you to help me bake a chocolate cake." "Chocolate cake!" Clara exclaimed. Chocolate cake was her favorite dessert. But then her eyes fell. She didn't want to spend time in the kitchen when there were still so many games to play outdoors. "I want you to help me bake the cake before your father comes home," Mrs. Barton said. "He went to the horse fair today, and he'll be coming home tired and hungry. Besides, Clara, baking is very important. It's like cooking and darning socks and sewing. They may not seem as much fun as going riding or playing ball, but believe me, young lady, one day you'll find them very useful, and you'll be glad you learned to do them. Anyway, don't you like licking the bowl after we've finished making the cake?" Clara smiled. Suddenly, she felt something by her leg. She looked down. "Button!" It was her little white dog rubbing against her leg. When she looked down at him, he sat down and raised his front left paw. Immediately, Clara noticed a red spot. "Button, what happened?" Clara sat down on the floor and held Button's paw, looking closely. Button trusted Clara. Her hand was so gentle. "Oh, poor Button. He broke his toenail. He's bleeding." Clara looked up at her mother. "May I go upstairs to take care of Button? Then I'll come down and help you bake the cake." "Of course you may," Mrs. Barton said, smiling. Everybody in the Barton family knew that Clara loved to nurse little birds and animals back to health. She'd taken care of dogs, cats, birds, even raccoons. "Come on, Button." Clara started upstairs, and Button limped up after her. She soaked his paw to clean off the blood, and then put an ointment on it. When she finished, Clara went back downstairs, took out the big bags of flour and cocoa, and started helping her mother with the baking. Many years later, Clara was to think back on how many things she'd done that winter day, just before Christmas: riding, nursing, and baking. One day in the future, those three things were going to mean the difference between life and death, not just for her, but for many, many people. Chapter 1, Discussion Questions. Number 1. Why do you think Clara had a closer relationship to David than her other siblings? Do you have a sibling or relative that you are closer to than others? What created your special bond? Number 2. What is the difference between bravery and recklessness? Do you think David and Clara showed bravery or recklessness in this chapter? Why? What would you have done if you were Clara? Number 3. David was Clara's writing teacher. Do you think he was a good teacher? Why or why not? What qualities do you think a good teacher should have? Please post your discussion in the comments below. Also, remember to click on the link in the description box below to fill out the registration form and become an official member of the OFLP YouTube Book Club. Next week, I will post the next chapter and discussion questions, so be on the lookout for that. Thank you so much for listening and participating. Have a great week.